In the next hour, you're going to master something that separates the top 1% from everyone else. The ability to speak with confidence, clarity, and magnetic presence. Most people stumble through conversations, mumble their way through presentations, and wonder why their ideas don't get the respect they deserve. But here's the truth. It's not about what you say, it's about how you say it. Your words are weapons. Your voice is your power. And today, you're going to learn to wield both with precision. We're not talking about fancy vocabulary or memorizing scripts. We're talking about rewiring your brain to communicate like someone who commands respect, builds instant rapport, and gets exactly what they want from every conversation. By the end of this video, you'll understand the psychology behind powerful communication, master the subtle art of voice control, and possess the tools to speak with unshakable confidence in any situation. Whether you're leading a meeting, having a difficult conversation, or simply introducing yourself at a networking event, you'll never again wonder what to say or how to say it. Let's begin. Chapter 1. The psychology behind articulate communication. Most people think articulate speaking is about having a big vocabulary or speaking slowly. They're completely wrong. Articulate communication starts in your mind, long before words ever leave your mouth. Your brain processes thousands of thoughts per second, but only a fraction of those thoughts make it to your conscious awareness, and even fewer make it out of your mouth in a coherent way. The difference between someone who speaks confidently and someone who stumbles through conversations lies in cognitive processing speed and emotional regulation. When you're nervous, your brain's fight-or-flight response kicks in, flooding your system with cortisol and adrenaline. This chemical cocktail literally makes you stupider in real time. Your working memory decreases, your vocabulary shrinks, and your ability to form complex thoughts evaporates. But here's what the research shows. Confident speakers aren't naturally less anxious. They've simply trained their brains to process stress differently. They understand that confidence isn't the absence of fear, it's the mastery of fear. When you speak with authority, you're not eliminating nervousness. You're channeling that energy into focused attention and purposeful delivery. The first step to becoming more articulate is understanding the 3 levels of communication processing in your brain. Level 1 is automatic processing, where you respond without thinking. This is where most people operate during conversations, reacting emotionally and speaking without intention. Level 2 is controlled processing, where you consciously choose your words and monitor your delivery. Level 3 is strategic processing, where you're simultaneously aware of your message, your audience's reaction, and the desired outcome of the conversation. Masters of articulation operate primarily at level 3. They're thinking several moves ahead, like chess players. While you're focused on what to say next, they're considering how their words will land, what questions they might generate, and how to guide the conversation toward their intended goal. This isn't manipulation, it's strategic communication. Your brain has something called the reticular activating system, a network of neurons that filters information based on what you've told it is important. When you believe you're a poor speaker, your RAS highlights every stumble, every awkward pause, every moment of uncertainty. But when you shift your identity to that of a confident communicator, your brain starts noticing opportunities to speak well. moments where you delivered a point effectively, and evidence that supports your new self-image. The most articulate people understand that communication is not about transferring information from one brain to another. It's about creating a shared experience, building emotional resonance, and guiding someone to a conclusion that feels like their own idea. This requires understanding the difference between saying what you think and saying what your audience needs to hear in order to think what you want them to think. Neuroscience research reveals that when we speak, mirror neurons in our listeners' brain fire as if they were speaking the words themselves. This means your emotional state, your confidence level, and your clarity of thought are literally contagious. When you speak with certainty, your listener's brain experiences that certainty. When you speak with confusion or hesitation, you transfer those states as well. This is why preparation isn't just helpful, it's neurologically essential. When you know your material deeply, when you've anticipated questions and prepared responses, your brain can focus on delivery rather than content generation. You move from reactive communication to intentional communication. You stop hoping you'll find the right words and start choosing the right words. The psychology of articulate communication also involves understanding cognitive load theory. Your brain has limited processing capacity at any given moment. When you're simultaneously trying to think of what to say, how to say it, whether you're making sense, and how your audience is reacting, you overload your cognitive resources. This is why nervous speakers often lose their train of thought or struggle to find simple words. Skilled communicators reduce cognitive load by automating certain aspects of their delivery. They develop standard phrases for transitions, practiced ways of explaining complex concepts, and reliable methods for organizing their thoughts in real time. This frees up mental resources for higher-level thinking, emotional regulation, and audience awareness. Understanding these psychological principles isn't academic knowledge. It's practical power. When you know why your brain sometimes betrays you in important conversations, you can implement specific strategies to work with your neurology rather than against it. You can train your mind to see speaking opportunities as exciting challenges rather than threatening situations. You can develop the mental frameworks that allow complex ideas to flow smoothly from your thoughts to your words. Chapter 2. Mastering your internal voice and confidence. Before you ever open your mouth, there's a conversation happening inside your head. This internal dialogue determines everything about how you'll communicate externally. Most people are completely unaware of this inner voice. But it's running commentary that either builds confidence or destroys it with every thought. Right now, as you're learning these concepts, there's a voice in your mind evaluating whether this information is useful, whether you're capable of implementing it, and whether it's worth the effort to change how you communicate. That voice is either your greatest asset or your biggest obstacle to becoming articulate and confident. The internal voice of confident speakers sounds fundamentally different from that of nervous communicators. Nervous speakers have an inner critic that constantly monitors for mistakes, anticipates rejection, and rehearses worst-case scenarios. Before they even speak, they're already preparing excuses for poor performance and bracing for negative reactions. Confident speakers have trained their internal voice to be a strategic coach rather than a harsh critic. Instead of thinking, "I hope I don't embarrass myself," they think, "I'm going to share something valuable." Instead of, "What if they disagree with me?" They think, how can I present this so they understand my perspective? The difference isn't just semantic. It's neurological. These different thought patterns create different emotional states, which create different physiological responses, which create different speaking outcomes. Your internal voice is programmable, but most people let it run on default settings installed during childhood. Maybe a teacher embarrassed you for giving a wrong answer. Maybe siblings teased you for how you pronounced certain words. Maybe parents corrected your grammar in ways that made you feel stupid rather than educated. These experiences create neural pathways that automatically fire whenever you're about to speak in situations that matter. But here's the powerful truth. You can rewire these pathways at any age. Neuroplasticity research shows that your brain continues forming new connections throughout your entire life. Every time you consciously choose a different thought pattern, you strengthen new neural pathways and weaken old ones. Over time, confident self-talk becomes as automatic as nervous self-talk used to be. The process starts with awareness. For the next week, pay attention to your internal dialogue before and during conversations that matter to you. Notice the difference between how you talk to yourself before speaking to a close friend versus before speaking to your boss, a stranger, or someone you're trying to impress. You'll likely discover that your internal voice becomes more critical and fearful when stakes feel higher. Once you're aware of these patterns, you can begin the reprogramming process. Elite speakers use specific mental techniques to prime themselves for confident communication. They don't wait to feel confident. They create confidence through intentional thought management. Before important conversations, they run mental rehearsals where they see themselves speaking clearly, making strong points, and having positive interactions with their audience. Visualization isn't New Age nonsense. It's neuroscience. When you imagine yourself speaking confidently, your brain creates neural pathways as if the experience actually happened. Athletes use this technique to improve performance because imagined practice creates real neurological changes. The same principle applies to communication skills. But visualization alone isn't enough. You need to address the underlying beliefs that generate nervous thoughts in the first place. Most communication anxiety stems from three core fears: fear of judgment, fear of rejection, and fear of not being good enough. These fears create a scarcity mindset where every speaking opportunity feels like a test you might fail rather than a chance to add value. Confident communicators operate from an abundance mindset. They believe they have something worth sharing, that their perspective matters, and that their audience will benefit from hearing their thoughts. This isn't arrogance, it's healthy self-regard based on genuine preparation and authentic value. To develop this mindset, you need evidence that contradicts your limiting beliefs. Start documenting moments when your communication creates positive outcomes. Keep a record of times when someone thanks you for explaining something clearly, when your question moves a conversation forward, or when your perspective helps someone see an issue differently. Your brain needs proof that confident communication is possible for you. Another powerful technique is reframing nervous energy as excitement. Physiologically, anxiety and excitement are nearly identical. Both involve increased heart rate, heightened alertness, and elevated energy levels. The only difference is your interpretation of these sensations. Instead of thinking, "I'm nervous," consciously choose to think, "I'm excited to share this idea." This simple cognitive reframe changes how your brain processes the physical sensations and actually improves your performance. The most advanced practitioners go even further. They use speaking opportunities as deliberately practiced sessions for emotional regulation and mental discipline. They see every conversation as a chance to strengthen their confidence muscles, regardless of the specific outcome. This approach transforms speaking from something that happens to you into something you actively use for personal development. Your internal voice also needs to develop realistic expectations about communication. Perfect speakers don't exist. Even the most articulate people occasionally stumble over words, lose their train of thought, or phrase things awkwardly. The difference is, they don't catastrophize these normal human moments. They simply course-correct and continue. Building genuine confidence requires accepting that imperfection is not only normal, but often makes you more relatable and trustworthy. When you stop trying to be perfect and start trying to be clear, helpful, and authentic, your communication naturally becomes more confident because you're no longer fighting against human nature. The internal voice that serves confident speakers is one that focuses on contribution rather than protection. Instead of asking, "How can I avoid looking stupid?" it asks, "How can I be useful?" Instead of, "What if they don't like what I say?" it asks, "How can I present this in a way that serves their interests?" This shift from self-protection to service changes everything about how you approach communication. Chapter 3. The Power of Nonverbal Communication. Your body speaks before you do. In fact, research suggests that up to 93% of communication effectiveness comes from nonverbal elements. Your posture, gestures, facial expressions, eye contact, and vocal qualities. This means you could have the most brilliant ideas in the world, but if your nonverbal communication contradicts your words, your message will fail. Most people focus entirely on what they're going to say while completely ignoring how they're going to say it. This is like buying a Ferrari and filling it with cheap gasoline. Your words are the content, but your nonverbal communication is the delivery system. A mediocre message delivered with confident body language will always outperform a brilliant message delivered with nervous energy. Understanding nonverbal communication starts with recognizing that your audience is unconsciously reading microsignals from your body and voice. These signals tell them whether you believe what you're saying, whether you're confident in your expertise, and whether you're worth paying attention to. You can't fake these signals because they originate from your internal state, but you can learn to manage your internal state through conscious control of your external presentation. Posture is the foundation of confident, non-verbal communication. When you stand or sit with your shoulders back, chest open, and spine straight, you're not just looking more confident, you're actually becoming more confident. Research by social psychologist Amy Cuddy demonstrates that powerful postures increase testosterone and decrease cortisol in your body within just 2 minutes. This hormonal shift creates the physiological state of confidence from the outside in. The opposite is equally true. When you slouch, cross your arms defensively, or make yourself smaller, you're training your brain to feel less powerful and less certain. Your posture sends signals not just to others, but to your own nervous system about how you should feel in any given situation. Eye contact might be the most powerful nonverbal tool you possess. When you make appropriate eye contact, you communicate confidence, sincerity, and engagement. But eye contact isn't just about looking at people. It's about how you look at them. Nervous speakers tend to dart their eyes around the room, avoiding sustained contact because it feels too intense. Confident speakers maintain steady, comfortable eye contact that shows they're present and unafraid to be seen. The key is finding the balance between enough eye contact to build connection and so much that it becomes uncomfortable. In one-on-one conversations, aim for about 70% eye contact while you're listening and 50% while you're speaking. When presenting to groups, make eye contact with individuals for 3 to 5 seconds before moving to the next person. This creates the feeling of personal connection, even in large audiences. Your facial expressions must align with your message. If you're discussing something serious while smiling inappropriately, or talking about exciting opportunities with a flat expression, your audience will trust what they see over what they hear. The most skilled communicators use facial expressions strategically to emphasize key points, show appropriate emotion, and create engagement with their audience. Gestures can either enhance your message or distract from it, depending on how you use them. Nervous speakers often develop repetitive gestures that release tension but communicate anxiety. Clicking pens, fidgeting with jewelry, or making small, repetitive hand movements. These gestures tell your audience that you're uncomfortable, which makes them uncomfortable. Confident speakers use purposeful gestures that support their words. When they talk about big concepts, their gestures expand. When they discuss specific details, their gestures become more precise. When they want to emphasize a point, they use deliberate hand movements that draw attention to key moments in their message. The size and scope of your gestures should match the size of your audience and the space you're in. Intimate conversations call for smaller, more subtle movements. Presentations to large groups require bigger, more expansive gestures that can be seen from the back of the room. Matching your gestures to your context shows spatial awareness and social intelligence. Your vocal qualities are technically part of nonverbal communication because they're about how you say things rather than what you say. Pace, volume, tone, and inflection all communicate meaning beyond your words. Speaking too quickly suggests nervousness or lack of confidence in your audience's ability to understand. Speaking too slowly can come across as condescending or uncertain. The most articulate speakers vary their vocal qualities to maintain interest and emphasize important points. They speak more slowly when introducing complex concepts, allowing their audience time to process. They increase their pace slightly when building energy or excitement. They use pauses strategically to create emphasis and give their audience time to absorb key ideas. Volume is another crucial element that many people mismanage. Speaking too softly forces your audience to strain to hear you, which creates fatigue and disengagement. Speaking too loudly can be overwhelming and aggressive. The right volume depends on your environment, but the general rule is to speak just loud enough that the person farthest from you can hear comfortably without effort. Tone of voice carries enormous emotional information. The same sentence can convey completely different meanings depending on your tonal quality. That's interesting. Can express genuine curiosity, polite dismissal, sarcasm, or surprise, all based on how you modulate your voice. Skilled communicators consciously choose their tone to match their intended message and audience. Your breathing patterns also communicate non-verbally. Shallow, rapid breathing suggests anxiety and creates a thin, weak vocal quality. Deep, Controlled breathing projects calm confidence and produces a fuller, more resonant voice. Before any important communication, take several deep breaths to center yourself and optimize your vocal production. The space you occupy and how you move through it sends powerful signals about your status and confidence level. Confident speakers claim appropriate space without being aggressive about it. They stand or sit in ways that make them visible and accessible. They move with purpose rather than nervous energy. They respect others' space while not shrinking their own presence. Understanding proxemics, the use of space in communication, helps you navigate different cultural and contextual expectations. Some situations call for more formal distance, others for closer, more intimate positioning. Reading the room and adjusting your spatial behavior accordingly shows social intelligence and respect for your audience. Chapter 4. Advanced Vocabulary and Word Choice Mastery. The words you choose don't just convey information, they shape how people think about the information you're sharing. Every word carries denotative meaning, what it literally refers to, and connotative meaning, the emotions and associations it triggers. Mastering advanced vocabulary isn't about using big words to sound smart. It's about selecting precise words that create the exact mental and emotional response you want in your audience. Most people operate with a functional vocabulary of around 3,000 to 5,000 words. But the average educated adult recognizes between 20,000 and 35,000 words. This gap between recognition vocabulary and active vocabulary represents untapped communicative power. When you consciously expand your working vocabulary, you gain access to more nuanced, more persuasive, and more memorable ways of expressing your ideas. But vocabulary expansion must be strategic, not random. Learning obscure words that you'll never use doesn't improve your communication. It makes you sound pretentious and disconnected from your audience. The goal is to develop a rich vocabulary of useful, powerful words that help you express complex ideas with precision and impact. Start by identifying the contexts where you most need to communicate effectively. If you're in business, focus on expanding your vocabulary around leadership, strategy, problem-solving, and relationship building. If you're in creative fields, develop richer ways to describe processes, aesthetics, and innovation. If you work in technical areas, master the ability to explain complex concepts in accessible language. The most powerful vocabulary development happens through exposure to excellent communicators in your field. Read speeches by leaders you admire. Listen to podcasts featuring articulate experts, and study how skilled writers in your industry express complex ideas. Pay attention not just to what words they use, but how they combine words to create specific effects. Word choice becomes particularly crucial when you're dealing with sensitive or controversial topics. The same idea can be presented in language that creates defensiveness or language that builds understanding. Instead of saying, "You're wrong about this," you might say, "I see this differently," or "My experience has led me to a different conclusion." These alternatives express disagreement without triggering defensive reactions. Understanding connotation allows you to choose words that predispose your audience toward the response you want. Calling something a challenge instead of a problem frames it as something to be overcome rather than something to be avoided. Describing someone as detail oriented instead of picky emphasizes positive aspects of careful attention. These aren't manipulative word games. They're strategic choices that help your audience focus on the aspects of reality that serve your mutual goals. Precision in vocabulary also involves eliminating words that weaken your message. Filler words like, like, you know, and sort of don't just make you sound uncertain. They train your brain to think imprecisely. When you habitually use vague language, you develop vague thinking patterns. When you commit to precise language, you develop clearer thought processes. Replace weak qualifiers with strong assertions when appropriate. Instead of, I think maybe we should consider possibly trying this approach. Say, I recommend we implement this strategy. Instead of, it seems like this might be a good idea, say, this solution addresses our core challenges. The difference isn't just stylistic, it's substantive. Clear language reflects clear thinking and inspires confidence in your judgment. Advanced word choice also involves understanding register, the level of formality appropriate to different contexts. The same idea might be expressed one way in a casual conversation, another way in a business meeting, and a third way in a formal presentation. Skilled communicators automatically adjust their vocabulary to match their environment and audience, without losing their authentic voice. Metaphors and analogies are advanced vocabulary tools that help make complex or abstract ideas concrete and relatable. When you can compare something unfamiliar to something your audience already understands, you dramatically increase comprehension and retention. The best metaphors don't just clarify, they illuminate new aspects of the concept you're explaining. For example, instead of saying, our team lacks coordination, you might say, we're like an orchestra, where everyone is playing their part perfectly, but no one is following the conductor. This metaphor doesn't just describe the problem, it suggests the solution. Better leadership and communication rather than individual skill development. Technical vocabulary serves a different function. In expert conversations, precise technical terms allow for efficient, accurate communication among people who share specialized knowledge. But the same technical language can exclude and confuse audiences who don't share that background. Skillful communicators code switch between technical precision and accessible explanation depending on their audience. The rhythm and flow of your word choices matter as much as their meaning. Varying your sentence length and structure keeps your audience engaged and helps emphasize important points. Short sentences create impact and clarity. Longer, more complex sentences allow you to explore nuanced ideas and show the relationships between different concepts. Master communicators use both, choosing their sentence structure as deliberately as they choose their individual words. Power words are vocabulary choices that create strong emotional responses and mental images. Words like transform, breakthrough, revolutionary, and unprecedented carry more energy than neutral alternatives like change, improvement, new, and different. But power words lose their impact when overused, so deploy them strategically for maximum effect. Building advanced vocabulary is an ongoing process that requires deliberate practice. Keep a vocabulary journal where you record new words you encounter, along with their meanings and example sentences. Set a goal of incorporating one new word into your conversation each day until it becomes natural. Read material that challenges your current vocabulary level, looking up unfamiliar words and studying how they're used in context. Chapter 5. Voice Control and Speaking Rhythm. Your voice is an instrument, and, like any instrument, it can be tuned, trained, and mastered to produce exactly the sound you want. Most people use only a fraction of their vocal potential because they've never learned to consciously control the basic elements of voice production: breath support, resonance, pitch variation, and rhythm. Professional speakers, singers, and actors spend years developing vocal control because they understand that how you sound is inseparable from how your message is received. A weak, thin voice undermines even the strongest content. A rich, well-controlled voice can make ordinary content sound compelling and authoritative. Voice control begins with breathing, but not the shallow chest breathing most people do unconsciously. Effective vocal production requires deep diaphragmatic breathing that provides steady air support for sustained, powerful speech. When you breathe from your chest, your voice becomes thin and strained during longer sentences. When you breathe from your diaphragm, you maintain vocal strength and clarity, regardless of how much you're speaking. Practice diaphragmatic breathing by placing one hand on your chest and one hand on your stomach. When you breathe properly, the hand on your stomach should move significantly while the hand on your chest remains relatively still. This takes conscious practice because most adults have developed inefficient breathing patterns that limit their vocal power. Resonance determines the richness and fullness of your voice. Sound originates from your vocal cords, but it gains power and quality from resonating in the spaces above your throat, your mouth, sinuses, and chest cavity. When you speak with good resonance, your voice has depth and presence that commands attention. When your voice lacks resonance, it sounds flat and weak. To develop better resonance, practice humming with your mouth closed, feeling the vibrations in your chest, throat, and face. Then, open your mouth and extend that same resonant quality to your speaking voice. Many people unconsciously tighten their throat when they're nervous, cutting off resonance and making their voice sound strained. Learning to keep your throat relaxed while maintaining good breath support allows your natural resonance to emerge. Pitch variation is what prevents your voice from becoming monotonous and boring. When you speak on the same pitch for extended periods, your audience's attention drifts because the human brain stops paying attention to unchanging stimuli. Strategic pitch variation keeps your audience engaged and helps emphasize key points in your message. Skilled speakers use pitch strategically rather than randomly. They lower their pitch to convey authority and finality, especially when making important statements or conclusions. They raise their pitch slightly when asking questions or introducing new topics to signal curiosity and engagement. They avoid uptalk, the pattern of ending statements with rising intonation that makes everything sound like a question and undermines your authority. Speaking rhythm involves the pace, pauses, and flow of your delivery. Many nervous speakers rush through their words, afraid that pausing will lose their audience's attention or give someone else a chance to interrupt. This creates a machine gun delivery style that overwhelms listeners and prevents proper comprehension of complex ideas. Confident speakers understand that pauses are powerful tools, not weaknesses, to be avoided. Strategic pauses give your audience time to process important information, create anticipation before key points, and demonstrate your comfort with silence. A well-placed pause can be more impactful than any word. Different types of content require different rhythmic approaches. When you're explaining complex technical information, slower delivery with frequent pauses allows your audience to follow your logic. When you're telling a story or building excitement, you might increase your pace to create energy and momentum. When you're making a crucial point, slowing down and adding pauses before and after emphasizes its importance. The concept of vocal flexibility means being able to adjust all these elements: breathing, resonance, pitch, and rhythm, based on your content and context. A presentation to a large audience requires different vocal choices than an intimate conversation. A serious discussion demands different vocal qualities than a celebration or informal chat. Vocal warm-ups before important speaking opportunities can dramatically improve your performance. Just as athletes warm up their muscles before competition, speakers should warm up their vocal apparatus before important conversations or presentations. Simple exercises like humming, lip trills, tongue twisters, and vocal scales prepare your voice for optimal performance. Articulation, the clarity with which you pronounce words, directly affects how easily your audience can understand and follow your ideas. Poor articulation forces listeners to work harder to decode your words, which reduces the mental energy they have available for processing your actual message. Clear articulation isn't about perfect pronunciation. It's about making your words easily accessible to your audience. Common articulation problems include mumbling, dropping the ends of words, running words together, and inconsistent volume levels within sentences. These habits often develop from nervousness, rushing, or simple lack of awareness. Recording yourself, speaking, and listening critically can help identify articulation patterns that might be interfering with your communication effectiveness. The rhythm of your speech should also include strategic variation in sentence length and structure. Short sentences create punch and clarity. They demand attention. They emphasize important points. Longer sentences allow you to explore complex relationships between ideas, provide necessary context and background information, and demonstrate sophisticated thinking about nuanced topics. Mastering voice control requires consistent practice, not just occasional attention. Set aside time each day to work on specific vocal skills. Read aloud from material that challenges you, paying attention to your breathing, resonance, pitch variation, and rhythm. Record yourself regularly to track your progress and identify areas that need additional work. Advanced practitioners learn to match their vocal choices to their strategic communication goals. When they want to build trust and intimacy, they might speak more slowly with lower pitch and softer volume. When they want to energize and motivate, they might increase pace and volume while using more dramatic pitch variation. When they want to convey expertise and authority, they might slow down, lower their pitch, and use more deliberate pauses. Chapter 6. Active listening as a speaking tool. Most people think speaking and listening are opposite activities, but master communicators understand that listening is actually the most powerful speaking tool you possess. When you listen with genuine skill and intention, you gather the information you need to craft responses that land with maximum impact. You discover what your audience cares about, how they process information, and what emotional state they're in. This intelligence allows you to speak in ways that connect persuade, and influence far more effectively than any prepared script ever could. Active listening isn't passive absorption of sound waves. It's an intense cognitive activity that requires focus, discipline, and strategic thinking. When you listen actively, you're simultaneously processing the literal content of what someone is saying, the emotional subtext beneath their words, the assumptions and beliefs that shape their perspective, and the unmet needs or desires that might be driving their communication. The first level of active listening involves hearing the actual words being spoken and understanding their literal meaning. Most people operate exclusively at this level, which explains why so many conversations feel unsatisfying and unproductive. They respond to the surface content without recognizing the deeper layers of communication happening simultaneously. The second level involves listening for emotional content. Every statement carries emotional information about how the speaker feels about the topic, about themselves, and about their relationship with you. When someone says, "I think we should consider other options," they might be expressing uncertainty, disagreement, fear, or a need for more information. Skilled listeners pick up these emotional cues and respond to both the content and the feeling behind it. The third level of active listening involves understanding the speaker's underlying needs, values, and motivations. When someone complains about a policy at work, they might be expressing a need for autonomy, fairness, or recognition. When they share excitement about a new project, they might be revealing values around creativity, achievement, or collaboration. This level of listening allows you to respond in ways that address what people really care about, not just what they're explicitly saying. Active listening also requires managing your own internal responses while someone else is speaking. Most people use listening time to prepare their rebuttal, formulate their next point, or judge what they're hearing. This internal commentary prevents true understanding and makes your eventual response less relevant and less powerful. Instead of planning what you'll say next, focus completely on understanding what's being communicated to you. Notice when your mind starts formulating responses and gently redirect your attention back to the speaker. This disciplined focus not only improves your comprehension, it also communicates respect and engagement that builds rapport and trust. One of the most powerful active listening techniques is reflecting back what you've heard before, adding your own perspective. This serves multiple functions. It confirms that you understood correctly. It shows the speaker that you were paying attention, and it gives you time to process the information before responding. Reflection doesn't mean parroting back exactly what someone said. It means demonstrating that you grasped both the content and the significance of their communication. For example, if someone says, "I'm frustrated because this project keeps getting delayed, and I feel like I'm wasting my time," you might reflect back. It sounds like these delays are affecting your ability to feel productive and make meaningful progress. This reflection acknowledges both the factual situation and the emotional impact, showing that you understand the full scope of their experience. Questions are another essential active listening tool. But most people ask terrible questions that shut down rather than open up communication. Closed questions that can be answered with yes or no provide minimal information and don't encourage elaboration. Leading questions that push people toward answers you want to hear are manipulative and obvious. Effective questions are open-ended, curious, and designed to help people think more deeply about their own experiences and perspectives. Instead of asking, "Don't you think we should try a different approach?" Ask, "What factors do you think we should consider when evaluating our current approach?" Instead of, "Are you happy with how this turned out?" Ask, "What aspects of this outcome work well for you, and what would you want to see improved?" These questions invite thoughtful responses and demonstrate genuine interest in understanding, rather than just getting agreement. The timing of your questions matters enormously. Interrupting someone mid-thought to ask for clarification breaks their flow and can feel disrespectful. But waiting until someone has completely finished their entire point might mean missing opportunities to understand complex ideas as they're being developed. Skilled listeners read verbal and nonverbal cues to find natural pause points where questions feel helpful rather than intrusive. Body language plays a crucial role in active listening. When you lean slightly forward, maintain appropriate eye contact, and keep your posture open and relaxed, you communicate engagement and interest. When you cross your arms, look away frequently, or lean back, you signal disinterest or disagreement, which can cause speakers to become defensive or shut down. Your facial expressions while listening send powerful messages about how you're receiving information. Nodding occasionally shows that you're following along, but excessive nodding can seem fake or impatient. Matching your facial expressions to the emotional tone of what you're hearing shows empathy and understanding. If someone is sharing something serious, your expression should reflect that gravity. If they're excited about something, your face should show appropriate interest and energy. Active listening also involves tolerating silence and allowing people time to think and formulate their thoughts. Many speakers need processing time, especially when discussing complex or emotional topics. When you rush to fill every pause with words or questions, you prevent people from going deeper into their thinking and sharing more meaningful insights. The most advanced active listeners learn to hear what's not being said as clearly as what is being said. They notice topics that seem to be avoided, emotions that appear to be suppressed, and assumptions that remain unstated. This skill allows them to ask questions that help speakers explore areas they might not have considered or felt comfortable addressing initially. Understanding different communication styles helps you adapt your listening approach to different people. Some speakers process out loud, thinking through problems verbally, and arriving at conclusions through conversation. Others prefer to think internally before speaking and share more polished, complete thoughts. Some people communicate very directly, while others hint at their meaning and expect you to read between the lines. Recognizing these different styles helps you listen more effectively and respond more appropriately. Active listening is particularly powerful in conflict situations because it helps de-escalate emotional tension while gathering the information you need to find solutions. When people feel heard and understood, they're more likely to listen to your perspective in return. When they feel dismissed or misunderstood, they become more entrenched in their positions and less open to alternative viewpoints. The goal of active listening isn't agreement, it's understanding. You can deeply understand someone's perspective without sharing it, and that understanding gives you tremendous power to craft responses that acknowledge their reality while introducing your own ideas in ways they can hear and consider. Practicing active listening requires conscious effort and regular feedback. Record conversations when possible and analyze how well you listened versus how much you talked. Ask people you trust to give you honest feedback about your listening skills. Notice patterns in how people respond to you, and whether they seem to feel heard and understood after conversations. Chapter 7. Handling difficult conversations and conflicts. Difficult conversations are inevitable in life, but most people handle them so poorly that they create more problems than they solve. They either avoid these conversations entirely, allowing issues to fester and relationships to deteriorate, or they approach them with so much emotional reactivity that they escalate conflicts instead of resolving them. Mastering difficult conversations is one of the most valuable communication skills you can develop because it allows you to address problems directly, maintain important relationships, and create positive outcomes from challenging situations. The first principle of handling difficult conversations is understanding that the difficulty usually lies not in the topic itself, but in the emotional charge surrounding it. When conversations involve ego, identity, values, or significant consequences, people's fight-or-flight responses activate, making rational discussion much more challenging. Your job is to manage both your own emotional state and help create conditions where others can remain rational and open to problem solving. Preparation is crucial for difficult conversations, but most people prepare by rehearsing their arguments and anticipating rebuttals. This adversarial approach almost guarantees poor outcomes because it frames the conversation as a battle to be won rather than a problem to be solved collaboratively. Instead, prepare by clarifying your goals for the conversation, understanding the other person's likely perspective and concerns, and developing language that focuses on shared interests rather than competing positions. Before entering any difficult conversation, get clear about what you really want to achieve. Do you want to change someone's behavior? Share information they need to know? Understand their perspective better? Repair a damaged relationship? Clear goals help you choose appropriate strategies and evaluate whether the conversation is moving in a productive direction. Understanding the other person's perspective requires empathy and intellectual humility. Try to see the situation from their point of view, considering their pressures, constraints, and concerns. What might make their position feel reasonable and necessary to them? What fears or needs might be driving their behavior? This perspective-taking doesn't mean agreeing with them, but it helps you approach the conversation with curiosity rather than judgment. The language you use in difficult conversations can either escalate tension or create opportunities for resolution. Avoid accusatory language that puts people on the defensive. Instead of, "You always interrupt me," try, "I'd like to finish my thoughts before hearing your response." Instead of, "You're being unreasonable," try, "I'm having trouble understanding your perspective on this." Use I statements to express your experience without making claims about the other person's intentions or character. "I felt frustrated when the deadline was moved without discussion" is much less threatening than, "You're always changing things at the last minute without considering how it affects other people." This approach allows you to share your perspective honestly, while giving the other person space to explain their actions without feeling attacked. Timing and setting matter enormously for difficult conversations. Choose times when both parties can focus without distractions and when emotions aren't running too high. Private settings usually work better than public ones because they reduce the risk of embarrassment and allow for more honest discussion. If someone seems stressed, angry, or distracted, it might be better to schedule the conversation for a time when they can engage more effectively. Starting difficult conversations well sets the tone for everything that follows. Begin by acknowledging the relationship and your positive intentions. I value our working relationship and want to address something that's been concerning me. Signals that you're approaching the conversation constructively rather than destructively. I'm bringing this up because I care about our team's success. Frames the discussion around shared goals rather than personal grievances. Managing your own emotional state during difficult conversations requires preparation and practice. When people say things that trigger anger, defensiveness, or hurt feelings, your physiological responses can hijack your ability to think clearly and respond strategically. Develop techniques for staying calm under pressure. Deep breathing, taking brief pauses to collect your thoughts, and reminding yourself of your goals for the conversation. If you feel yourself becoming too emotional to continue productively, it's better to take a break than to say something you'll regret. I want to give this conversation the attention it deserves, and I need a few minutes to collect my thoughts, is much better than pushing through when you're not in a state to communicate effectively. Listen for the underlying needs and concerns beneath people's positions and demands. When someone insists on a specific solution, ask what problem they're trying to solve or what outcome they're hoping to achieve. Often, there are multiple ways to meet those underlying needs, even when the specific demands seem unreasonable or impossible. For example, if someone demands that all meetings be shorter, they might be expressing needs for efficiency, respect for their time, or better work-life balance. If you can address those underlying needs through different solutions, you might find approaches that work better for everyone involved. De-escalation techniques become crucial when conversations heat up despite your best efforts. Lower your voice rather than raising it. Slow down your speech and use calming body language. Acknowledge the other person's emotions without necessarily agreeing with their interpretation of events. I can see that this situation is really important to you. Validates their feelings without endorsing their version of what happened. Sometimes difficult conversations require multiple sessions. Not every issue can be resolved in one discussion, especially when emotions are high or when complex problems require creative solutions. Ending one conversation well and scheduling follow-up discussions can be more productive than trying to force resolution when people aren't ready. Know when to involve others in difficult conversations. Sometimes, a neutral third party can help facilitate discussions when direct communication isn't working. Sometimes you need input from someone with more authority or expertise. Sometimes the conversation needs to include additional stakeholders who are affected by the issue. Recognizing when you need help isn't a sign of failure. It's strategic thinking. The goal of most difficult conversations should be mutual understanding and collaborative problem-solving rather than winning or being right. Even when you can't reach agreement, you can often reach understanding, which preserves relationships and keeps doors open for future solutions. Sometimes the best outcome is agreeing to disagree while maintaining respect and professionalism. Practice difficult conversations in low-stakes situations so you're better prepared when high-stakes situations arise. The skills you develop in everyday disagreements and minor conflicts will serve you well when you need to handle major issues or relationship problems. View every challenging conversation as an opportunity to develop your skills rather than just an obstacle to overcome. Chapter 8. Building rapport and charisma through communication. Charisma isn't a mysterious quality that some people are born with and others lack forever. It's a set of learnable communication skills that create connection, influence, and magnetic presence. When you understand the specific behaviors that generate charismatic responses in others, you can develop these abilities through deliberate practice and conscious application. At its core, charisma is about making other people feel important, understood, and energized when they interact with you. Charismatic communicators have mastered the art of directing their attention so completely toward others that those people feel like they're the most interesting person in the room. This isn't fake flattery or manipulation. It's genuine curiosity and engagement that creates powerful emotional connections. The foundation of charismatic communication is presence, your ability to be fully focused on the person or people you're interacting with. In our distracted world, true presence has become rare and therefore extremely powerful. When someone feels that you're completely focused on them, without mental drift or competing priorities, they experience something most people rarely give or receive. Developing presence requires training your attention like a muscle. During conversations, notice when your mind wanders to other topics, future tasks, or judgments about what you're hearing. Gently redirect your focus back to the person in front of you. This mental discipline becomes easier with practice and dramatically improves the quality of your interactions. Charismatic communicators also master the art of making others feel heard and understood. They ask questions that show genuine interest in people's experiences, thoughts, and feelings. But more importantly, they listen to the answers with complete attention and respond in ways that demonstrate they've not only heard the words but grasped the meaning and significance behind them. The key is asking questions that go beyond surface-level information to explore what people care about, what challenges they're facing, and what excites them. Instead of, "How was your weekend?" try, "What was the best part of your weekend?" Instead of, "How's work going?" ask, "What's the most interesting project you're working on right now?" These questions invite more engaging responses and show that you're interested in their experience, not just making conversation. Building rapport requires finding genuine common ground with people. But this doesn't mean pretending to share interests you don't have or agreeing with opinions you don't hold. It means looking for authentic connections in values, experiences, challenges, or goals. Even when people have different backgrounds or perspectives, you can often find shared humanity in universal experiences like wanting to do good work, caring for family, or pursuing personal growth. Matching and mirroring are subtle rapport-building techniques that involve naturally adapting your communication style to complement the person you're talking with. If someone speaks slowly and thoughtfully, slowing down your own pace slightly creates a sense of harmony. If they're energetic and expressive, increasing your own energy level helps create connection. This isn't mimicry, which feels fake and obvious. It's subtle adaptation that happens naturally when you're genuinely engaged with someone. The power of validation in building charisma cannot be overstated. When you acknowledge and affirm other people's thoughts, feelings, and experiences, you make them feel valued and understood. This doesn't require agreeing with everything they say, but it does mean recognizing their perspective as legitimate and worthy of consideration. Validation can be as simple as saying, "That makes sense," or "I can understand why you'd feel that way," or "That's an interesting point I hadn't considered." These phrases show that you're taking their input seriously and processing it thoughtfully rather than just waiting for your turn to speak. Charismatic storytelling is another crucial skill that makes your communication more engaging and memorable. Stories create emotional connections and help people understand complex ideas through concrete examples. But charismatic storytellers don't just tell stories. They craft stories that resonate with their audience's interests and experiences. The best stories for building rapport are ones that show vulnerability, learning, or shared struggle. When you share a story about a mistake you made and what you learned from it, you show humility and humanity that others can relate to. When you tell a story about overcoming a challenge, you inspire others and show resilience. When you share something that connects to the other person's experience, you demonstrate understanding and empathy. Using people's names frequently in conversation is a simple but powerful charisma technique. Research shows that hearing our own name activates pleasure centers in our brain and creates positive associations with the speaker. But this only works when it feels natural rather than forced or manipulative. Charismatic communicators also master the art of making people feel special and appreciated. They notice and comment on positive qualities, achievements, and contributions that others might overlook. They remember details from previous conversations and follow up on things that matter to people. They express genuine gratitude and appreciation for both big and small gestures. The key to authentic appreciation is being specific rather than generic. Instead of "great job," try "I really appreciated how thoughtfully you handled that difficult question from the client. Your response showed you were really listening to their concerns." Specific appreciation feels more genuine and shows that you're paying attention to people's actual contributions. Energy management is crucial for charismatic communication. Charismatic people don't have unlimited energy, but they're strategic about how they use the energy they have. They bring their best energy to interactions that matter most, and they know how to recharge so they can show up fully when needed. This might mean taking a few minutes before an important meeting to center yourself and get into a positive, engaged state. It might mean limiting draining interactions when possible so you have energy for relationships and conversations that matter most. It definitely means taking care of your physical and emotional well-being so you have the capacity to focus on others rather than being absorbed in your own stress or fatigue. Humor, when used skillfully, is a powerful charisma tool because it creates positive emotions and shared experiences. But charismatic humor is never at someone else's expense. It's self-deprecating, observational, or situational, in ways that bring people together rather than creating distance or discomfort. The best charismatic communicators use humor to diffuse tension, highlight absurdities, and create moments of connection and joy. They're also attuned to their audience and adjust their humor accordingly. What's funny in a casual setting might be inappropriate in a formal context, and what works with one group might fall flat with another. Building charisma through communication is ultimately about developing genuine interest in other people and learning to express that interest in ways that make them feel valued and energized. It's not about tricks or techniques, though those can be helpful. It's about cultivating authentic curiosity, empathy, and appreciation for the people around you. Chapter 9. Persuasion and Influence Techniques. Persuasion is not manipulation. True persuasion involves helping people see information, possibilities, and consequences they might not have considered on their own, then allowing them to make informed decisions based on this expanded understanding. When you influence ethically, You're serving both your interests and theirs by creating outcomes that benefit everyone involved. The most powerful persuasion begins with understanding what people already want and value. Instead of trying to convince them to want what you want, you show them how what you're proposing helps them achieve their existing goals and satisfy their current needs. This requires deep listening and genuine curiosity about their priorities, concerns, and decision-making criteria. Before attempting to persuade anyone, invest time in understanding their perspective thoroughly. What problems are they trying to solve? What outcomes would make them feel successful? What constraints or pressures are they operating under? What fears or concerns might make them hesitant to change? This intelligence allows you to frame your proposals in terms that resonate with their existing motivations. The principle of reciprocity is fundamental to ethical influence. When you provide value first, without expecting immediate returns, you create a psychological tendency for others to want to provide value back to you. This doesn't mean keeping score or manipulating people with artificial generosity. It means genuinely looking for ways to help others achieve their goals as a foundation for long-term relationship building. Reciprocity can involve sharing useful information, making helpful introductions, offering assistance with their projects, or simply providing a great experience during your interactions. When people associate you with positive outcomes and helpful resources, they become more receptive to your ideas and requests. Social proof is another powerful influence principle that acknowledges people's tendency to look to others for guidance about appropriate behavior and good decisions. When you can show that similar people in similar situations have benefited from what you're proposing, you reduce uncertainty and risk perception that might prevent action. But social proof must be relevant and genuine to be effective. Generic testimonials or irrelevant examples can actually backfire by making your approach seem generic or poorly researched. The most powerful social proof comes from people your audience respects who faced similar challenges and achieved positive results through approaches similar to what you're recommending. The commitment and consistency principle recognizes that people strongly prefer to act in ways that align with their stated beliefs, values, and previous commitments. When you can show how your proposal fits with positions they've already taken or principles they've already expressed, you make it psychologically easier for them to say yes. This might involve referencing their stated priorities, reminding them of successful approaches they've used before, or showing how your proposal aligns with their stated values or strategic objectives. The key is making genuine connections rather than forcing artificial links that don't hold up under scrutiny. Scarcity and urgency can be legitimate influence factors when they're based on real constraints rather than artificial pressure. If there are genuine time limits, resource constraints, or opportunity costs associated with delays, presenting these realities helps people make informed decisions about timing and priorities. However, manufactured scarcity and false urgency are manipulative tactics that damage trust and relationships. Ethical persuasion involves presenting real information about constraints and consequences while respecting people's right to make decisions on their own timeline. The contrast principle shows how people evaluate options relative to alternatives rather than in absolute terms. When you help people understand the costs and consequences of not taking action, or when you provide clear comparisons between different approaches, you help them make more informed decisions about relative value. This doesn't mean exaggerating problems or understating alternatives. It means helping people see the full picture of costs, benefits, risks, and opportunities associated with different choices. Good decision-making requires understanding both what you gain and what you give up with any choice. Authority and expertise influence how seriously people take your recommendations, but these must be genuine and relevant to carry weight. Building credible authority involves demonstrating deep knowledge, sharing relevant experience, and showing good judgment over time. It also means being honest about the limits of your expertise and knowing when to refer people to better sources of information or assistance. Credible expertise also involves staying current, continuing to learn, and being willing to change your recommendations when new information or better options become available. People trust advisors who prioritize their interests over ego or consistency. Emotional connection often determines whether people act on logical arguments. When you can help people visualize and feel the positive outcomes of taking action, you create motivation that pure logic alone cannot generate. This involves painting vivid pictures of success, helping people imagine how their lives or work will improve, and connecting your proposals to outcomes they care deeply about. But emotional appeals must be grounded in reality to maintain trust and credibility. False promises and unrealistic expectations create short-term compliance but long-term disappointment and relationship damage. The foot-in-the-door technique recognizes that people who agree to small requests become more likely to agree to larger requests later. This works because taking action creates psychological investment and shifts identity toward being someone who supports your cause or direction. Starting with easy, low-risk commitments allows people to experience positive outcomes before being asked for larger investments. Timing plays a crucial role in successful persuasion. People are more open to new ideas and change when they're dissatisfied with current results, facing new challenges, or experiencing transitions that create natural openness to different approaches. Presenting ideas when people are ready to hear them is much more effective than pushing when resistance is high. This requires patience and strategic thinking about when and how to introduce ideas. Sometimes the most persuasive thing you can do is wait for a better moment rather than forcing a conversation when conditions aren't favorable. The most sustainable influence comes from helping people feel ownership over the ideas and solutions you're proposing. When you involve people in developing recommendations, ask for their input on implementation, and incorporate their feedback into your proposals, they become co-creators rather than passive recipients of your ideas. This collaborative approach takes more time and effort than simply presenting finished solutions, but it creates much stronger buy-in and commitment to follow through. People support what they help create. Chapter 10. Speaking under pressure and managing anxiety. Speaking under pressure reveals the difference between good communicators and great ones. When stakes are high, emotions are intense, and everyone's attention is focused on you, your true communication skills emerge. Most people crumble under pressure because they've never learned to manage the psychological and physiological responses that high-stakes situations create. But pressure can actually improve your performance when you understand how to work with your nervous system rather than against it. The first step to speaking well under pressure is reframing stress as energy rather than as a threat. The physical sensations of nervousness, increased heart rate, heightened awareness, and elevated energy levels are nearly identical to the sensations of excitement and peak performance. Your brain's interpretation of these sensations determines whether they help or hurt your performance. Instead of thinking, "I'm so nervous, I'm going to mess this up," consciously choose to think, "I'm energized and ready to do my best work." This simple cognitive reframe changes how your brain processes the physical sensations and can actually improve your focus and delivery rather than undermining them. Understanding the physiology of pressure responses helps you develop specific strategies for managing them. When you perceive threat or high stakes, your sympathetic nervous system activates, releasing stress hormones that prepare your body for fight or flight. This response can be useful for physical emergencies, but it interferes with the calm, focused thinking required for effective communication. Controlled breathing is the most direct way to shift from sympathetic to parasympathetic nervous system dominance. When you breathe slowly and deeply, especially emphasizing longer exhales than inhales, you send signals to your brain that there's no immediate threat and that calm, rational thinking is appropriate. Practice the 4-7-8 breathing technique. Inhale for 4 counts, hold for 7 counts, exhale for 8 counts. Repeat this pattern 4 times before any high-pressure speaking situation. This technique quickly shifts your nervous system toward calm alertness rather than anxious reactivity. Preparation is your most powerful tool for managing speaking anxiety. But it must be the right kind of preparation. Many people prepare by memorizing scripts word for word, which actually increases anxiety because it makes them dependent on perfect recall under pressure. Instead, prepare by deeply understanding your key points and developing flexible ways to express them. Know your content so well that you can explain it conversationally rather than reciting it formally. Practice speaking about your topics in different ways, using different examples and analogies. So you're not dependent on a single predetermined sequence of words. This flexibility gives you confidence that you can communicate effectively even if your mind goes blank or you lose your planned approach. Visualization is a proven technique for improving performance under pressure. Professional athletes use mental rehearsal to prepare for competition, and the same principles apply to communication. Spend time imagining yourself speaking confidently and effectively in the specific high-pressure situation you're preparing for. Make your visualization as detailed and realistic as possible. See yourself walking into the room with confidence, making eye contact with your audience, delivering your key points clearly, and handling questions with poise. Include potential challenges in your visualization and see yourself managing them successfully. This mental rehearsal creates neural pathways that support confident performance when the real situation arrives. Physical preparation is equally important for managing pressure. Regular exercise reduces baseline anxiety levels and improves your body's ability to handle stress. Adequate sleep ensures that your cognitive resources are at their peak when you need them most. Proper nutrition provides steady energy rather than the spikes and crashes that can destabilize your emotional state. On the day of important speaking situations, avoid excessive caffeine, which can amplify anxiety symptoms. Eat a light meal that provides steady energy without making you feel heavy or sluggish. Arrive early enough to familiarize yourself with the environment and settle in without feeling rushed. Grounding techniques help you stay present and focused when pressure mounts. The 5-4-3-2-1 technique involves noticing 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch, 3 things you can hear, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This sensory awareness pulls your attention away from anxious thoughts and into the present moment. Progressive muscle relaxation is another effective technique. Starting with your toes and working up to your head, tense each muscle group for 5 seconds, then release and notice the contrast. This process helps release physical tension that accumulates during stressful situations and interferes with smooth delivery. Reframing your relationship with mistakes is crucial for speaking well under pressure. Many people amplify their anxiety by catastrophizing potential errors and imagining that any stumble will result in disaster. In reality, minor mistakes are normal and often unnoticed by audiences who are focused on your overall message rather than perfect delivery. Develop recovery strategies for common speaking challenges. If you lose your train of thought, have standard phrases that buy you time to refocus. Let me think about the best way to explain this. Or, that's an important point that deserves a thoughtful response. If you misspeak, simply correct yourself briefly and continue without drawing excessive attention to the error. Building pressure tolerance requires gradual exposure to increasingly challenging speaking situations. Start with low-stakes opportunities where you can practice managing nervousness without serious consequences. Volunteer to speak at team meetings, join organizations like Toastmasters, or create opportunities to present to friendly audiences. Each time you successfully manage pressure and deliver effectively, you build evidence that contradicts anxiety-producing beliefs about your speaking abilities. Your brain learns that pressure situations are manageable rather than threatening, which makes future high-stakes communication feel less overwhelming. The most advanced pressure management technique is shifting your focus from self-protection to service. When you're primarily concerned with how you look, whether you'll make mistakes, or what people will think of you, you create internal pressure that interferes with performance. When you focus on how you can serve your audience, what value you can provide, and how you can help them achieve their goals, you redirect nervous energy toward productive purposes. This service orientation also helps with imposter syndrome, the feeling that you don't deserve to be speaking or that you'll be exposed as incompetent. When you're genuinely focused on helping others rather than proving yourself, your expertise and preparation feel more relevant and accessible. Recovery planning involves preparing for worst-case scenarios, so they feel manageable rather than catastrophic. What will you do if technology fails? If you're asked a question you can't answer, or if you completely lose your train of thought? Having specific plans for these situations reduces their power to create anxiety and gives you confidence that you can handle whatever happens. Remember that pressure often indicates importance, which means you're dealing with situations that matter. Instead of wishing pressure would disappear, learn to see it as a signal that you're operating at a level where your communication skills can make a real difference. This reframe transforms pressure from an enemy to be avoided into a challenge to be mastered. Chapter 11. Mastering Public Speaking and Presentations. Public speaking is where all your communication skills converge into a single, high-impact performance. Whether you're presenting to 5 colleagues or 500 strangers, the fundamentals remain the same: clear thinking, confident delivery, and genuine connection with your audience. But public speaking amplifies everything. Your strengths become more powerful, and your weaknesses become more obvious. This is why mastering presentations isn't just about speaking skills. It's about becoming a more confident, articulate person overall. The biggest mistake most people make in public speaking is focusing on themselves instead of their audience. They worry about how they look, whether they'll make mistakes, and what people will think of them. This self-focus creates anxiety and makes their delivery feel awkward and disconnected. Great speakers flip this entirely. They focus completely on serving their audience, sharing valuable information, and creating a positive experience for everyone in the room. Before you even begin preparing your content, you need to understand your audience deeply. What do they already know about your topic? What do they need to know? What are their concerns, interests, and goals? What would make this presentation genuinely valuable for them? When you can answer these questions clearly, you can craft a presentation that feels relevant and useful rather than generic and forgettable. Your presentation structure should follow a clear, logical progression that makes it easy for your audience to follow your thinking. Start with a compelling opening that grabs attention and establishes why your topic matters. Then, preview what you're going to cover so people know what to expect. Develop your main points with evidence, examples, and stories that make abstract concepts concrete and memorable. End with a strong conclusion that reinforces your key messages and gives people clear next steps. The opening of your presentation is crucial because it sets the tone for everything that follows. Avoid weak openings like, "Good morning, my name is," or "Thank you for having me here today." These phrases waste precious attention and make you sound like everyone else. Instead, start with something that immediately engages your audience. A surprising statistic, a thought-provoking question, a relevant story, or a bold statement that makes people want to hear more. For example, instead of, "Today I'm going to talk about leadership," you might start with, "In the next 20 minutes, you're going to learn the 3 communication techniques that separate extraordinary leaders from everyone else." By the time we're finished, you'll have specific tools you can use immediately to increase your influence and impact in any situation. Your main content should be organized around 3 to 5 key points maximum. The human brain can only process so much information at once, and trying to cover too much ground dilutes the impact of everything you say. Choose your most important points and develop them thoroughly rather than skimming the surface of many different ideas. Each main point should follow a consistent structure. Make the point clearly. Provide evidence or reasoning to support it. Give a concrete example that illustrates it in action and explain why it matters to your audience. This pattern helps people understand and remember your ideas, while keeping your presentation organized and logical. Stories are your most powerful tool for making presentations memorable and persuasive. Facts and statistics inform the mind, but stories move emotions and create lasting impact. The best presentation stories are specific, relevant to your key points, and show rather than tell your main messages. Personal stories can be particularly effective because they show vulnerability and humanity that audiences connect with. When telling stories in presentations, keep them concise and focused. Include sensory details that help people visualize the scene, but avoid unnecessary tangents that distract from your main point. Practice your stories out loud until they flow smoothly and feel natural rather than rehearsed. Visual aids should support your presentation, not replace it. Too many speakers create slides packed with text and then read them word for word. This approach bores audiences and makes the speaker seem unnecessary. Instead, use visuals to illustrate concepts, provide evidence, and create emotional impact. Keep text minimal. Use high-quality images and design slides that enhance rather than compete with your spoken words. The key to powerful delivery is conversational confidence. You want to sound like you're having an important conversation with friends rather than delivering a formal speech. This means varying your pace, using natural gestures, making eye contact with individuals throughout the audience, and speaking with the same energy and authenticity you'd use in a one-on-one discussion about something you care about. Eye contact in public speaking requires a different approach than in personal conversations. Instead of trying to look at everyone at once, which creates a weird scanning effect, focus on one person for a complete thought or sentence, then move to another person in a different section of the room. This creates the feeling of personal connection even in large groups. Managing nervousness in public speaking starts with redefining what nervousness means. Those butterflies in your stomach and elevated heart rate aren't signs of weakness. They're signs that your body is preparing for peak performance. Channel that energy into enthusiasm for your topic rather than fighting against it. Practice is essential, but it must be the right kind of practice. Don't memorize your entire presentation word for word, which makes you sound robotic and creates anxiety about forgetting lines. Instead, know your key points thoroughly and practice transitioning smoothly between them. Rehearse your opening and closing until they're rock solid, since these are the moments when nerves typically hit hardest. Handling questions and audience interaction requires preparation and flexibility. Anticipate the most likely questions you'll receive and prepare thoughtful responses. When you don't know an answer, say so honestly and offer to follow up later rather than trying to fake knowledge you don't have. Repeat or rephrase questions to ensure the entire audience heard them and to buy yourself a moment to think. The conclusion of your presentation should be as strong as your opening. Summarize your key points briefly, reinforce why they matter to your audience, and end with a clear call to action or next steps. Avoid weak endings like, "That's all I have," or "Any questions?" Instead, end with conviction and purpose that leaves your audience energized and ready to act on what they've learned. Recovery strategies are crucial for handling the unexpected moments that inevitably arise in public speaking. If technology fails, have backup plans ready. If you lose your place, pause briefly and return to your last key point rather than panicking. If someone asks a hostile question, stay calm and address the substance while maintaining your composure and professionalism. The more you practice public speaking in various settings, the more confident and natural you'll become. Seek out opportunities to present, whether at work, in community organizations, or through groups like Toastmasters. Each presentation teaches you something new about connecting with audiences and managing the dynamics of public communication. Chapter 12. Emotional intelligence in communication. Emotional intelligence is the hidden force behind all effective communication. You can master every technical aspect of speaking, perfect your vocal delivery, and develop an extensive vocabulary. But if you can't read emotional cues, manage your own emotional state, and respond appropriately to others' feelings, your communication will always feel hollow and disconnected. Emotional intelligence in communication involves 4 key components: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. These skills work together to help you navigate the complex emotional landscape that exists in every human interaction. Self-awareness is the foundation of emotionally intelligent communication. You need to understand your own emotional patterns, triggers, and responses before you can effectively manage them or read them in others. Most people operate on emotional autopilot, reacting to situations based on unconscious patterns developed over years of experience. Developing emotional self-awareness requires paying attention to your internal state throughout the day. Notice what situations make you feel confident versus anxious. Observe which topics trigger defensive reactions or strong emotions. Recognize the physical sensations that accompany different emotional states. This internal monitoring helps you understand your emotional patterns and gives you choice about how to respond rather than simply reacting automatically. Your emotional state directly affects your communication effectiveness. When you're stressed, angry, or anxious, your voice changes, your body language shifts, and your thinking becomes less clear. Others pick up on these emotional signals unconsciously and respond accordingly. If you seem nervous, they feel less confident in your expertise. If you appear angry, they become defensive. If you project calm confidence, they feel more relaxed and receptive. Self-management is the ability to regulate your emotions rather than being controlled by them. This doesn't mean suppressing feelings or pretending to be emotionless. It means acknowledging your emotions while choosing how to express them in ways that serve your communication goals. When you feel strong emotions during conversations, pause before responding. Take a deep breath and ask yourself what outcome you want from the interaction. This brief moment of reflection allows you to choose your response rather than simply reacting to your immediate emotional impulse. Social awareness involves reading the emotional states of others through their verbal and nonverbal communication. People constantly broadcast information about their feelings through their tone of voice, facial expressions, body language, and word choices. Most communicators miss these signals entirely because they're too focused on what they want to say next. Learning to read emotional cues requires shifting your attention from your own internal experience to careful observation of others. Notice changes in people's energy levels, speaking pace, and physical posture. Pay attention to incongruence between their words and their emotional signals. Someone might say they're fine with a decision, while their tight jaw and crossed arms suggest otherwise. Different personalities express emotions differently, which adds complexity to emotional awareness. Some people wear their feelings openly and express them directly. Others are more reserved and communicate emotions through subtle changes in behavior. Some process emotions internally before sharing them, while others think out loud and work through feelings verbally. Understanding these different emotional styles helps you adapt your communication approach accordingly. With expressive personalities, you can address emotions directly and openly. With more reserved people, you might need to create safe spaces for them to share feelings gradually. With analytical types, you might need to help them connect logical decisions to emotional outcomes. Empathy is a crucial component of emotional intelligence that allows you to understand and share the feelings of others. This goes beyond intellectual understanding to actually experiencing something similar to what the other person is feeling. When you respond with genuine empathy, people feel heard, understood, and valued. Developing empathy requires active imagination and emotional flexibility. When someone shares an experience with you, try to imagine how you would feel in their situation. Consider their background, pressures, and constraints that might influence their emotional response. This perspective-taking helps you respond with genuine understanding rather than superficial sympathy. Validation is one of the most powerful emotional intelligence tools in communication. When you acknowledge and accept someone's emotional experience without necessarily agreeing with their interpretation or conclusions, you create psychological safety that enables deeper, more honest conversation. Validation might sound like, "I can see why that situation would be frustrating," or "It makes sense that you'd feel uncertain about such a big decision." These responses show that you understand their emotional reality, while leaving room for different perspectives on solutions or actions. Emotional contagion is the phenomenon where emotions spread between people unconsciously. When you interact with someone who's anxious, you might start feeling anxious too. When you're around confident, positive people, you often feel more optimistic yourself. This emotional transmission happens automatically through mirror neurons and unconscious mimicry. Understanding emotional contagion helps you take responsibility for the emotional climate you create in your interactions. When you maintain calm confidence during stressful situations, you help others feel more centered. When you bring genuine enthusiasm to conversations, you often inspire similar energy in others. Managing emotional contagion requires strong emotional boundaries and self-regulation skills. You can empathize with others' feelings without taking them on as your own. You can remain calm in the presence of anxiety, confident around insecurity, and positive despite negative energy from others. Conflict situations require especially sophisticated emotional intelligence because emotions typically run high and rational thinking often becomes difficult. The key is recognizing that behind every position in a conflict, there are underlying emotions and unmet needs driving people's behavior. Instead of focusing solely on the logical aspects of disagreements, skilled communicators address the emotional dimensions as well. They acknowledge fears, validate concerns, and help people feel heard even when agreement isn't possible. This emotional attunement often diffuses tension and creates space for problem-solving. Emotional intelligence also involves knowing when emotions are appropriate and helpful versus when they might be counterproductive. There are times when expressing frustration, excitement, or concern enhances your message and builds connection. There are other times when emotional expression might distract from your content or make others uncomfortable. Building emotional intelligence requires ongoing practice and feedback. Pay attention to how people respond to your communication style. Ask trusted friends or colleagues for honest feedback about your emotional awareness and management. Notice patterns in your relationships and communication effectiveness that might reveal blind spots in your emotional skills. The goal isn't to become emotionally perfect or to always say the right thing. It's to develop greater awareness, flexibility, and skill in navigating the emotional aspects of human communication. When you can read emotions accurately, manage your own emotional state effectively, and respond to others with empathy and wisdom, your communication becomes exponentially more powerful and meaningful. Chapter 13. Cultural sensitivity and adaptation in communication. In our interconnected world, the ability to communicate effectively across cultural differences has become essential for personal and professional success. Culture shapes everything about how we communicate. Our directness or indirectness, how we show respect, what topics we consider appropriate, how we handle conflict, and even how we interpret silence and eye contact. Cultural sensitivity in communication isn't about political correctness or walking on eggshells around people from different backgrounds. It's about developing genuine curiosity about different ways of thinking and communicating. recognizing that your cultural norms aren't universal and adapting your communication style to build bridges rather than barriers. The first step to culturally sensitive communication is understanding your own cultural programming. The way you communicate feels natural and right to you because it's what you learned growing up. But it's just one approach among many valid alternatives. Your directness might feel honest and efficient to you, while seeming rude and aggressive to someone from a culture that values harmony and face-saving. High-context cultures communicate much of their meaning through implication, nonverbal cues, and shared understanding rather than explicit words. In these cultures, what's not said is often as important as what is said. People expect others to read between the lines, pick up on subtle signals, and understand messages that aren't spelled out directly. Low-context cultures, by contrast, rely heavily on explicit verbal communication. They value clarity, directness, and detailed explanations. What you say is what you mean, and ambiguity is seen as poor communication rather than diplomatic subtlety. Understanding whether you're communicating with someone from a high-context or low-context background helps you adjust your style accordingly. With high-context communicators, you might need to pay more attention to non-verbal cues, be more diplomatic in your language, and allow time for indirect approaches to sensitive topics. With low-context communicators, you can be more direct and explicit without worrying about causing offense. Power distance refers to how cultures handle hierarchy and authority. In high-power distance cultures, there are clear expectations about how people at different levels should communicate with each other. Challenging authority directly, interrupting senior people, or speaking out of turn might be seen as disrespectful regardless of your intentions. In low-power distance cultures, hierarchy is less rigid, and people are expected to speak up, share ideas, and challenge decisions regardless of their position. What feels like healthy debate and engagement in one culture might feel like insubordination in another. When communicating across power distance differences, pay attention to formal versus informal language, titles and honorifics, and who speaks when in group settings. Adjust your approach to match the cultural expectations of the situation, rather than imposing your own cultural norms. Individualistic cultures emphasize personal achievement, self-reliance, and direct personal responsibility. Communication in these cultures often focuses on individual contributions, personal goals, and direct accountability. People are expected to advocate for themselves and their ideas. Collectivistic cultures prioritize group harmony, consensus, and collective responsibility. Communication emphasizes team success, group decisions, and maintaining relationships. People might be reluctant to stand out individually or to express disagreement that could disrupt group cohesion. These differences affect everything from how decisions are made to how feedback is given. In individualistic cultures, direct personal feedback might be appreciated as helpful for improvement. In collectivistic cultures, the same feedback might be seen as face-threatening and damaging to relationships. Uncertainty avoidance describes how comfortable cultures are with ambiguity and unclear situations. High uncertainty avoidance cultures prefer detailed plans, clear rules, and predictable outcomes. Communication in these cultures often involves thorough preparation, comprehensive documentation, and careful risk analysis. Low uncertainty avoidance cultures are more comfortable with ambiguity and flexible approaches. They might prefer general frameworks rather than detailed plans and be more willing to adapt as situations develop. These differences affect meeting styles, decision-making processes, and project management approaches. Understanding your audience's uncertainty avoidance preferences helps you structure your communication to match their comfort levels with ambiguity and change. Nonverbal communication varies dramatically across cultures. Eye contact that shows confidence and sincerity in one culture might be seen as aggressive or disrespectful in another. Personal space preferences, appropriate touching, and gesture meanings all vary based on cultural background. Rather than trying to memorize all possible cultural differences, develop sensitivity to nonverbal cues and adjust based on how people respond to your behavior. If someone seems to step back when you move closer, respect their space preferences. If they avoid eye contact, don't force it by moving into their line of sight. Time orientation also differs significantly across cultures. Monochronic cultures view time linearly and emphasize punctuality, schedules, and sequential task completion. Communication in these cultures is often efficient and focused on covering agenda items within allotted time. Polychronic cultures view time more flexibly and prioritize relationships over schedules. They might see rigid adherence to agendas as rude if it prevents important relationship building or cuts off meaningful discussion. Language differences add another layer of complexity to cross-cultural communication. Even when people share a common language, their fluency levels, cultural references, and communication styles might differ significantly. Speaking more slowly, using simpler vocabulary, avoiding idioms and cultural references, and checking for understanding become important skills. The key to successful cross-cultural communication is approaching differences with curiosity rather than judgment. Instead of viewing different communication styles as wrong or inefficient, see them as alternative approaches that might offer insights or advantages you haven't considered. Building cultural intelligence requires ongoing learning and exposure. Seek opportunities to interact with people from different cultural backgrounds. Read about different cultural values and communication styles. Ask questions when you notice differences, rather than making assumptions about what they mean. Most importantly, remember that cultural generalizations are starting points for understanding, not definitive rules about how individuals will behave. Every person is unique regardless of their cultural background, and effective communication requires paying attention to individual preferences and styles while being informed by cultural awareness. When you make cultural mistakes, and you will, apologize sincerely and ask for guidance about more appropriate approaches. Most people appreciate genuine efforts to bridge cultural differences even when those efforts aren't perfect. Chapter 14. Advanced Conversational Skills and Networking. Networking isn't about collecting business cards or manipulating people into helping you advance your career. True networking is about building genuine relationships based on mutual interest, shared values, and reciprocal value creation. When you approach networking as relationship building rather than transactional exchange, you develop connections that last for decades and create opportunities you never could have planned or predicted. The foundation of effective networking conversation is authentic curiosity about other people. Instead of focusing on what you can get from someone, focus on understanding who they are, what they care about, and what challenges they're facing. This shift in perspective transforms networking from an uncomfortable sales activity into genuine human connection. Most people approach networking with a scarcity mindset, worrying that others won't be interested in talking to them or that they don't have enough to offer in return. This anxiety creates awkward, self-focused conversations that feel forced and unnatural. When you approach networking with genuine interest in learning about others, conversations flow naturally and people remember you positively. Starting conversations at networking events requires moving beyond generic opening lines that everyone uses. Instead of, "What do you do?" try, "What brings you to this event?" Or, "What's the most interesting project you're working on right now?" These questions invite more engaging responses and show that you're interested in their current experience rather than just categorizing them by job title. The key to memorable networking conversations is finding genuine connections with people rather than trying to impress them with your accomplishments. Look for shared experiences, common challenges, mutual interests, or complementary expertise. These connection points create the foundation for ongoing relationships. Active listening becomes especially important in networking situations because people often feel like they're competing for attention and trying to get their own message across. When you listen with complete focus and ask thoughtful follow-up questions, you stand out from everyone else who's waiting for their turn to talk. Asking powerful questions separates good networkers from great ones. Instead of surface-level inquiries, ask questions that help people think differently about their work or situation. What's the biggest challenge in your industry right now? What trends are you most excited about? What would need to change for you to feel really successful in your role? These questions invite deeper conversation and show sophisticated thinking. Following up effectively is where most networking efforts fail. People exchange contact information, but never create meaningful, ongoing connection. The best follow-up happens within 48 hours and references something specific from your conversation. Instead of generic, "Nice to meet you," messages reference a particular topic you discussed. Share a relevant resource or make a helpful introduction. Building your networking pipeline requires being strategic about the events you attend and the relationships you prioritize. Instead of trying to meet everyone at every event, focus on having fewer, deeper conversations with people who share your interests or could become genuine connections. Quality networking involves thinking several steps ahead about how you might be helpful to people you meet. This doesn't mean immediately pitching your services. It means listening for challenges where your expertise, connections, or resources might be valuable. When you consistently look for ways to help others, they naturally want to reciprocate when opportunities arise. Virtual networking requires adapting traditional relationship-building skills to digital environments. Video calls, online events, and social media platforms all offer opportunities for meaningful connection, but they require different approaches than in-person interaction. In virtual settings, being fully present becomes even more important because it's easier to multitask or become distracted. Make eye contact with your camera, eliminate background distractions, and give your complete attention to the person you're speaking with. These behaviors are more noticeable and appreciated in digital environments where partial attention is common. Social media networking extends relationship building beyond formal events and scheduled meetings. Platforms like LinkedIn allow you to maintain ongoing connection with your network by sharing valuable content, commenting thoughtfully on others' posts, and staying updated on their professional developments. But social media networking requires the same authenticity and value focus as in-person relationship building. Instead of just promoting yourself, share insights that help others, celebrate their successes, and contribute meaningfully to industry conversations. This approach builds your reputation as someone worth knowing and staying connected with. Personal branding supports networking by making it clear what value you bring and what kinds of opportunities interest you. This doesn't mean creating a fake persona or exaggerating your capabilities. It means being intentional about how you present your expertise, interests, and unique perspective. Developing your networking skills also involves understanding different networking styles and adapting your approach accordingly. Some people prefer large group conversations. Others feel more comfortable in one-on-one discussions. Some enjoy formal networking events. Others prefer casual coffee meetings or activity-based networking. Pay attention to what environments and interaction styles work best for you, and seek out networking opportunities that match your strengths while gradually expanding your comfort zone. The goal isn't to become someone you're not. It's to become more skilled at building relationships in ways that feel authentic to you. Long-term relationship maintenance is what transforms networking contacts into valuable professional relationships. This involves staying in touch periodically, sharing relevant opportunities or information, and being responsive when people reach out to you. The best networkers think in terms of years and decades rather than immediate transactions. Remember that networking is ultimately about building a community of people who know and respect your work, understand your goals, and want to see you succeed. When you approach relationship building with this long-term perspective, individual conversations feel less pressured and more purposeful. Chapter 15. Creating your personal communication action plan. Everything you've learned about articulate communication and confident speaking means nothing unless you implement it consistently in your daily life. Knowledge without action is just entertainment. The difference between people who improve their communication skills and those who stay stuck at their current level is systematic practice and deliberate implementation of specific techniques. Your communication transformation starts with honest assessment of your current abilities and clear vision of where you want to be. Most people have never critically evaluated their communication strengths and weaknesses, so they continue repeating the same patterns while hoping for different results. Complete a thorough communication audit by recording yourself in various speaking situations over the next week. Include phone calls, meetings, presentations, and casual conversations. Listen to these recordings with fresh ears and note patterns in your vocal delivery, word choice, organization of ideas, and overall effectiveness. Ask 3 people who know you well to give you honest feedback about your communication style. What do you do well? What could you improve? How do you come across to others? This external perspective often reveals blind spots that you can't see yourself. Based on your self-assessment and feedback, identify the 3 most important areas for improvement. Don't try to work on everything at once, which leads to overwhelm and inconsistent progress. Focus intensively on 3 specific skills until they become natural. Then add new areas of development. Your daily practice routine should include vocal exercises, vocabulary building, and conversation skills practice. Spend 10 minutes each morning doing vocal warm-ups that improve your breath support, resonance, and articulation. Read challenging material aloud to practice smooth delivery and clear pronunciation. Expand your vocabulary systematically by learning 1 new word each day and using it in conversation. But focus on useful words that enhance your ability to express complex ideas precisely rather than obscure words that make you sound pretentious. Practice conversational skills by setting specific goals for your interactions each day. Today, you might focus on asking better questions. Tomorrow, you might work on active listening. Next week, you might practice managing difficult conversations with more skill and composure. Join speaking organizations like Toastmasters or similar groups where you can practice public speaking in a supportive environment. These organizations provide structured feedback, regular speaking opportunities, and a community of people working on similar skills. Create accountability systems that ensure consistent progress rather than sporadic effort. Partner with someone who's also working on communication skills and commit to weekly check-ins about your practice and progress. Set specific, measurable goals and track your improvement over time. Document your communication successes and challenges in a learning journal. After important conversations, presentations, or meetings, write brief notes about what went well, what you could improve, and what you learned. This reflection process accelerates learning and helps you identify patterns in your development. Seek out increasingly challenging communication opportunities that stretch your abilities without overwhelming you. Volunteer to present at team meetings. Join committees that require facilitation skills, or take on projects that involve persuading or influencing others. Address your specific communication fears systematically rather than avoiding situations that make you uncomfortable. If you're afraid of public speaking, start with very small, low-stakes presentations and gradually work up to larger, more important speaking opportunities. Develop your personal communication style rather than trying to imitate someone else's approach. Study communicators you admire and learn from their techniques. But adapt these techniques to fit your personality, values, and natural strengths. Your personal communication action plan should include both short-term and long-term goals. In the next 30 days, focus on implementing one specific technique from each major area: vocal delivery, body language, conversation skills, and presentation abilities. Over the next 90 days, tackle more complex skills like handling difficult conversations, building rapport with different personality types, and managing speaking anxiety. These skills require more time to develop, but create lasting transformation in your communication effectiveness. Your one-year vision should include specific communication outcomes you want to achieve: leading presentations with confidence, navigating difficult conversations skillfully, building stronger professional relationships, or communicating with greater influence and impact in your field. Remember that communication skill development is a lifelong journey rather than a destination. Even the most skilled communicators continue learning, practicing, and refining their abilities throughout their careers. The goal isn't perfection. It's continuous improvement and increasing effectiveness. Stay motivated during challenging phases of development by focusing on the real-world benefits of better communication. Better relationships, increased influence, greater career opportunities, and improved confidence in all areas of life are the natural results of investing in your communication skills. The most important insight you can carry forward is that confident, articulate communication is a choice you make in every interaction. You don't have to wait until you feel ready or until you've perfected every technique. You can choose to speak with intention, listen with focus, and communicate with purpose, starting right now. Every conversation is an opportunity to practice these skills. Every presentation is a chance to demonstrate your growing capabilities. Every difficult interaction is a chance to apply what you've learned and build evidence that you can handle whatever communication challenges come your way. Your voice matters. Your ideas deserve to be heard. Your communication skills will determine how effectively you can share your knowledge, influence positive change, and build the relationships that create a meaningful, successful life. The time to start implementing everything you've learned is now.